Research Landscapes, our collaborative effort to share research findings on Utah's land, water, and air. I'm Lisa Barreau, the Vice President for Research at Utah State University, and I'm just thrilled to see such a big crowd here today. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to gather with representatives from our community, our city and state and community leaders, and stakeholders who share similar interests in the challenging issues that we face in Utah related to our shared resources. Before we get started today, I'd like to first give a shout out to OC Tanner. They have graciously given us this event space to hold our Research Landscapes event, and we want to thank them for their continuing support for land, water, and air research at Utah State. We value our ongoing partnership, and again, we thank you for the use of this wonderful space. I think all of you may realize that today is a very special Research Landscapes. And we're going to hear more about how special that is in a few moments, but I want to take a moment to do a few more shout outs. I want to especially thank today Ricardo Laranja, the Director of Multimedia Operations for the Keene College of the Arts at USU, for assisting with today's performance. His input has been absolutely critical to bringing this to you today. It is an absolute joy to have the Fry Street Quartet with us today for this special presentation. Utah State University's Fry Street Quartet is a powerhouse in the world of chamber music. This group has been praised by the New York Times as, quote, a triumph of ensemble playing. This year, they will be receiving the prestigious Governor's Mansion Award. Celebrated for their innovative vision, they bridge classical masterpieces with contemporary works inspired by themes of nature, social justice, and global sustainability. As the only endowed quartet at a university in Utah, and one of only a handful in the country, the Fry Street Quartet is uniquely positioned to highlight how research and art enhance one another. By combining art and science, the quartet exemplifies a deep commitment to advocacy through music. I'd now like to turn the microphone over to Associate Vice President Alexa Sand, who is a faculty member in the Keene College of the Arts, to share her thoughts on this combination of combining art and research. Alexa?
So I'll be quick because I think we all want to cut to the chase. I want to say that to me, this day is extraordinary because it brings into this forum where we focus on USU's leading researchers in land, water, and air, a group of people who I know have been committed to advancing science through the arts. And I think in many ways their work is exemplary for artists everywhere, no matter what genre, whether they're visual artists or theater, performing artists, dancers, musicians. Artists play such a critical role in the advancement of human knowledge, not only by drawing attention to the work of scientists and innovators in other fields, but also by engaging people on an emotional and visceral level with the natural world, with the findings of science, with the ways in which the arts, in fact, are themselves a form of research. And I think this is really important, whether you're talking about Leonardo da Vinci, who was first and foremost an anatomist, and then also a fairly well-known painter, or, Sir Brian May, the British astrophysicist, also co-founder of the band Queen. I think the intersection between the kinds of creative thinking and creative problem solving that make for great art that's also the foundation and the backbone of great scientific research. And we have too often tried to separate them into different categories, where in fact, when they are brought together, we know things in a more full and organic way. So I think because the arts connect emotion and consciousness together in this way, they really overcome our resistance to new ideas, and they help us think constructively and critically about the challenges that we face as human beings. Okay, so that's my little piece of arts and science philosophy. I want to move on to these wonderful people, our quartet here, and talk a little bit, not actually about them as individuals, because that would take the rest of the time, their fantastic accomplishments, but rather about the instruments that they play. So Robert Waters is playing today a violin by Guadagnini. Yes, I speak Italian, but I still had to pause over that pronunciation. It was made in 1763 in Parma, Italy. Rebecca McFall is playing a violin built by Pietro Giacomo Ruggeri in 1720, and her bow is in fact a French bow by Nicolas Mer. And we're talking about instruments that have their own lives and their own histories and have seen a lot more than most of us in their time. Bradley Otteson, our violist, yay viola, is performing on an extremely rare instrument, a viola by Giovanni Battista Ruggeri from about 1700, so it's Daddy Ruggeri. And our cellist, Anne Frances Baylis, is playing a cello by a very luminary name in the history of string instrument building by Andrea Guarneri, and it was produced or built in 1689. So we bring together here today the cutting edge of chamber music and also its history. So now I believe we have a short documentary, and I will step away and let you really sink into the experience of this performance. Documentary.
to the right and a little bit in front of it, there's kind of some sage.
Oh yeah, I see them.
And they're sitting in there.
Yeah. Oh wow, there's a bunch out there.
Thank you all so much for being here today. We've just had a glimpse into the making of quite a unique piece of music. Perhaps a piece of music that could only have been made someplace like Utah State University. In our role as ensemble in residence at USU, a land-grant university, much of our creative work has reflected an ongoing interest in exploring the intersection of art and nature, and this project brings in a bit of science and technology to that as well. In 2022, with the partnership of the Nova Chamber Music Series in Salt Lake City, we commissioned the California-based composer Nicholas Benavides for a new project. With this particular work, we knew we wanted to express something about our sense of place here in the landscape of the Mountain West. And as we discussed so many possibilities with Nick, he became more and more interested in the iconic grouse species of our region. So, early that same spring of 2022, Nick came to Utah, and with some friendly assistance from the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, he journeyed into the field to observe and record the sounds of two protected species, the greater sage grouse, who we just saw in the video, and the sharp-tailed grouse. He visited their spring mating grounds, otherwise known as their lek. The recorded sounds of these birds create the musical language of this piece, with their voices amplified and interpreted by the instruments of the string quartet. For the premiere at USU, which we also saw a little bit of footage from, we decided that we wanted to give back just a little bit to both the birds and to the community. And so we held a fundraising concert for the Bridgerland Audubon Society, who carry out conservation work throughout Cache Valley. So today's performance, to set the scene, right now, as we speak, throughout the highlands of the Sagebrush Sea, a timeless ritual is beginning again, maybe in and around some spring snowstorms, as it has for thousands of years. The grouse gather, the males display and dance and call and drum, while the females consider and choose for mates those that give the most outstanding performances. This plays out over weeks and weeks. Some of the males come on strong, maybe a little bit bombastic, clumsy. Others are eager, youthful, impatient. The most successful are not only impressive, but also able to gauge their output over the course of the long spring in order to give themselves the best odds. In this piece, one of us in the quartet represents the female, the center of attention, while the other three gather around in competition. One of us will be successful in wooing our female. We invite you to guess who is who. I know there's some academics here today. There will be a quiz. While we listen, we may also find ourselves asking deeper questions. How did this ritual evolve? What instinct brings these birds together? What setting do they need for a successful lek and to secure the future of their species? And perhaps most central to our gathering today, what can we learn by listening to these birds? Please enjoy Lek by Nicholas Benavides.
Okay, so how'd we do? No, I mean on our quiz. How'd we do, meaning who wants to guess who our discerning female was? Yeah. Indeed, it was one Robert Waters. Yes. And the victor, any guesses? Indeed, it was Brad. It was totally the viola. In rehearsal, we like to joke that, maybe Robert and Brad would like to take a moment while Anne and I regain our dignity. So given that we're here at the invitation of the Research Landscape series, I'll ask us to step back from the piece itself for just a moment and consider music a little further as a model for inquiry. In other words, why in the world is a string quartet here giving this presentation? Science and music are often seen as separate, like Alexa mentioned, but they are both forms of deep listening. Music, like science, is a way of knowing. But beyond data and analysis, music is also a way of feeling and connecting. Another way to think about these two disciplines is that they both live inside a framework of sense-making and sense-receiving. In science, the act of sense-making is taking in data, measurements, information. In music, it's the composer's score and markings, adherence to rhythm and pulse, knowledge of harmony and form. Sense receiving, in all cases, involves a deep listening by tuning into a frequency as wide as you dare. Some aspects of music making, and in particular playing chamber music, warrant a bit of exploration here. In chamber music, I'm sure you all noticed, there is no conductor. With one person on a part, there is no hiding inside a section of the orchestra or depending on constant leadership from the podium. It is real-time co-creation in service of a shared goal. It is an embodiment of interconnection and collaboration. Chamber music is also a conversation. When we make music together, we are tuned into each other in a constant state of listening, suggesting, and adjusting. Or to put it another more efficient way, we're living in a state of relational attunement. And if we're not in that state, then I assure you nobody wants to hear us. The meaning that emerges is born of this deep listening, this relational attunement. It is not born from asserting control or dominance. There's trust and respect involved in making music, and the cycle is completed when we include all of you, an audience of listeners, to take it all in. Playing chamber music is a practice, a way of being in the world that may have something important to teach us. A way of sense receiving that we might do well to emphasize more. And here, I'll admit that I sometimes fantasize about string quartet playing as a prerequisite to becoming a politician. What might shift if those in power had to learn not just how to be heard or how to get their way, but how to truly co-create for the greater good? You can dream. My quartet's interest in exploring the intersection of science, nature, and art began years ago with our larger scale multidisciplinary piece called Rising Tide, the Crossroads Project. This performance, a weave of music, science, spoken word, and visuals, was co-created with USU's own Rob Davies, a physicist and educator, who many of you here know, who wrote and performed a poetic script with us that explored the wonder of nature's paradigms, how they ran counter to the societal paradigms that humans created and made dominant over time, and the deep trouble that we've created by compromising our life support systems in service of having over being. After 67 performances over the course of more than a decade, we've really lived with that project. And doing so profoundly marked and changed our relational attunement to an ecological attunement, if you will, to life, all forms of life on Earth. While we've finally retired Rising Tide, much of our commissioning work continues in this vein, as evidenced by LEC. And we remain committed to using music as a form of inquiry, hopefully one that inspires us and our listeners to broaden our perspective and reverence life, all life, just a little more. Deep listening reveals what has always been true. Everything and everyone is connected. This is clear when playing chamber music, when rallying for a shared goal in service of something bigger, when hearing the sage-grouse's ancient recurring symphony as a call to continue life itself. So, back to our sage-grouse. In thinking about preparing these comments, I wanted to consider what these birds are facing right now. Habitat loss due to human development and expansion, climate change that is shifting their food sources and breeding cycles, conservation efforts that exist but are often caught in the push-pull of economic growth versus ecological preservation. A population that has declined, according to the US Geological Survey, approximately 80% since 1965, with nearly 40% of that decline occurring since 2002. So their incredible dance, once a ritual of renewal, is becoming a ritual of precarity, a desperate act on disappearing ground. In recognizing that the sage-grouse are the real stars of today's performance, I asked myself what the sage-grouse might wish for us humans to hear and contemplate. Maybe a simple reminder that they live here too. A reminder that they are our incredible, beautiful, occasionally goofy kin. A reminder that it's extraordinary that we share a planet with such a creature. Maybe they would want us to notice some warning signs. Their lecking ritual has been unchanged for millennia, but the land that holds it is vanishing. They call, they dance, they perform their ancient symphony, but the audience, the ecosystem, is disappearing. What happens when the call of life, the music of living systems, is drowned out by the noise of human systems, by extraction, development, by this storm that we call progress? Maybe they would want us to notice blind spots in our collective priorities. Like the fact that humans have built a world that values expansion. But what if survival depends on restraint? Will humans wake up in time to once again realize that prioritizing life, human and more than human, must be at the heart of our shared goals? Not as a sacrifice, but as a path to true abundance, where the flourishing of ecosystems is recognized as inseparable from our own. I realize I'm revealing my own value set here, but I want to leave you with an open question. What if, in this time of planetary crisis, the most urgent thing we can do is not speak louder, but listen more deeply with all of our forms of inquiry? So thank you so much for listening. And now we'd love to hear from you and continue the discussion with your input.
Thank you, thank you. Research Landscapes is an event where we bring you the latest in creative inquiry at Utah State across all of our disciplines. And today, part of what we want to do is engage all of you. Maybe perhaps about how you're feeling about the piece. Maybe questions to the performers themselves. But we're looking to engage you in a conversation, because truly investigating, truly understanding, as Rebecca points out, means listening. And we're here to listen to the ideas you bring to us. And so with that, I'm going to be walking around with a microphone. And I invite anyone who wants to, I've got a question over here already. We've got a microphone up front. And so we'll spend about 15 to 20 minutes having a conversation.
Thank you for that beautiful performance. What a cool piece. In talking about listening, I'm curious, how was it, what's the experience like of listening to each other playing the instruments and also like balancing the listening through the earpiece, and what was that process like for you in your practice?
I'll start. I'm sure all of us have things to say about it. It is definitely new. It's a new way of listening and combining skills and combining. We often, when we rehearse any piece of music, it's not unusual for us. We have a giant metronome in our studio, which is very loud. It's helpful to kind of help get us organized in some of the earlier stages of preparing a piece, and so we'll put that on. But we talk often about, with ourselves and even with our students, about the difference between just playing with a metronome kind of by rote versus playing with a metronome and playing musically and listening to each other at the same time, but as the metronome being on, almost as if it's a fifth member. So performing with a metronome in your ear, however, is a different experience altogether. I think it's the first time for all four of us. It's the first time for me, definitely. And it's so funny that we have to continue to remind ourselves not just to do the easiest thing, which is to play with the metronome in our ear, but to continue to make music together, despite the fact that the metronome is in our ear, and we need that there. If that weren't there, we would not be able to coordinate what we need to coordinate with the bird sounds and the electronics. But we also really need to still stay relating to each other as a string quartet. So yeah, it's been a new chapter for us in a really interesting way, and it's stretching us also in a really great way.
Thank you, yes.
Yes, I have two questions. Did everybody in the quartet get to go see the LEC in person, or was it just Brad?
Not yet. We have hopes this spring.
Okay.
Yep, we're gonna go again. But this last time, mine was rained out, and Brad was the only one who made it.
I've been. It's awesome. You just have to be there really early.
Yeah, it's a fascinating process, and to go meet the birds where they are, you know, to go to their world. It sort of shows how far we are removed from that in a way in our daily life. It feels like an odyssey. You have to get up at 3 o'clock, 3:30 in the morning. The footage we showed you, I was with Adam Brewerton, who works for the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. We were sort of recreating the journey that he went on the previous year with Nick. But that was up at the top of Blacksmith Fork Canyon, up above Hardware Ranch, if some of you know where that is. And it's up above the snow line, so you saw that little tank that we had to take to get out there. It's really inaccessible to most of us. So the whole, you saw the footage. It's a journey to get there and to go seek out the birds where they are, but without disturbing them also, because they need that solitude. That's sort of the golden rule when observing the Lekis, that you cannot disturb them.
My second question is there a recording available or a video? I heard, this will be the first part, but I've told people about this piece that want to get their hands on it and they couldn't make it today, so how do we share this with people that can't be here?
We're in the initial stages of creating a documentary around the project, so that's how we had the introductory footage. So we're building that out. We're hoping to speak with some people who are close to the grouse and know about them, and maybe have bring some more of the quartet on journeys out to the lek. So we've all experienced that. That's on the way. There's a lot to talk about.
Thank you.
I was elected to our city council in Cottonwood Heights, and I brought our director of our arts council, Laura Garcia, as well as other members of the community are here. Peter Glenn is a retired professor, and one of the initiatives over the last 3 years is to advance an understanding and appreciation for the natural world, for our resources, and how from a municipal, or it could be a county, state, federal level, we can engage. I also happen to be married to the childhood best friend of Steve Chingren, and anybody in the world of sage grouse would know his name, and I have laid on my tummy about 30 yards from a lek and watched the grouse myself early one morning about 10 years ago. And so all in all, this is such a phenomenal project. And if you could find that intersection of reaching those who are in the positions to protect with our economic means, not only in Utah, most of Steve Chingren's work is up in Wyoming. He's made counts and people are nodding. And so this is touching to me in every way. I just came from California, if anybody knows the Hutchins Consort. It's 8 musical string instruments that were designed by a woman named, I can't think of her first name, but Hutchins is her last name. Anyways, I feel like I'm just really on there. So do I have a specific question? I'm not sure, but I would be interested to know how those, I am the chair of the Association of Municipal Councils, which brings all a council member or two from all the cities around Salt Lake County together every other month. So I would love to do anything I can to help elevate your work, and just thank you so much.
Well, this is, of course, what's so powerful, as has been mentioned now by multiple people today, of this intersection of science and art. Art can allow us to feel things more viscerally, to connect to topics more directly. It connects to us emotionally, it connects to us in ways that information alone can't always. And so, we've culled together, thanks to Rebecca, a whole lot of great information about, sort of ways for all of us individually to contribute and do our part in spreading this information. But of course, what you're responding to is, being able to experience something like this that just kind of gets at your core. And so maybe you didn't have a question, and I'm not sure I have an answer, except to say that I think, more of this kind of endeavor, this is one of the things that, as Brad mentioned, as an ensemble in residence, at a land grant institution, this is something that we're trying to instill in our students as well, is looking for opportunities to do this very thing, to touch audiences, to understand topics more deeply, to respond to them maybe more meaningfully, to take extra steps to create change. So it's a huge responsibility, but one that we're grateful to be even a tiny part of.
Thank you. Thank you for the performance and appreciated that. I'm just curious how you go about selecting a composer for what you intended to do, and to what degree you collaborated with that composer in this piece.
The work with composers always starts with a conversation, and sometimes a recommendation from another composer or friend. In the case of Nick Benavides, he was introduced to us by a composer friend named Gabriella Lena Frank, who we've worked with many times, and she suspected we would have an affinity, and so that was born of relationships too. And it started with a Zoom conversation. We knew that we wanted some themes, some ego themes, some place-based themes to be explored, and then we wanted, him to find his space in that. What was going to speak to him? He was, after all, the person who was going to create the work. And Nick loves birds. He had just written a string quartet about a roadrunner, and he was really excited about that. And so it took about one conversation and a few emails, and then he kind of focused in on the sage-grouse as something he wanted to explore. And then he was all in. He made huge efforts to drive from LA, to go to the lek himself, carrying these big parabolic microphones, creating field recordings, and then all the splicing of the bird sounds. We were a little bit worried for him for a while when he was in a room for 12 hours a day listening to bird sounds and trying to align things, and transcribing them. Right. But I guess the quick answer is it's always kind of through somebody you know, and then around, things that you have in common caring about.
I should also add, we've composed quite a number of works in the last 10 or 12 years, commissioned, yes. Quite a number of works in the last 10 or 12 years. And in terms of how we work with composers, it really does vary. Sometimes you commission a piece, and the piece is delivered, and you perform it and say thank you. Maybe you play it once for the composer, and they say fine, and that's that. I mean, it does sometimes work that way, but this was the opposite. We actually had quite a bit of back and forth with Nick on any number of elements, including the final sort of love duet between viola and first violin. It was considerably shorter, the first version around, and we thought, we just want more of that. Can you write more of this love music between us? And so it's always when performers and composers have that kind of investment in defining what the ideal goal is and then working together towards it. That's really the most fun, the most rewarding, and that was definitely the case with this piece.
I would just say also that you don't always know where it's going to go. Nick kind of had an idea. He knew he was interested in learning about these birds and more about Utah. So he came out here and went out into the field with his microphones at 4 in the morning in March. And we collected field recordings. I think at that point there was no peace in his mind that he was going to use these to compose. It was what he learned while he was out there and what he heard from the birds afterwards, which then gave rise to the piece itself. So there's no roadmap ahead of us sometimes. Sometimes it truly is an act of creation, and what comes to be, and that's real creation. I would also say that a piece like this, there's so many relationships here too. There's Nick, there's us, there's Utah State University, there's the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, there's the Gabriella Lena Frank Creative Academy of Music in California, there's the Nova Chamber Music Series, there's the Bridges and Audubon Society, with this quirky little piece right in the middle of it. But all of these constituents sort of playing a role in making it happen and having it come to be. And all of you in the room today are sort of the latest part of that story. So it lives onward.
So I was just going to say, love the piece. It's awesome. I mean, I think they say something to the effect that it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something, and you guys are well beyond that. Well beyond, probably in spades. And just, I've spoken to a few people here. My mom was a voice major, and so I grew up with a lot of classical. And I think as a teenager, my inclination was to push against that. So I really love rock. But that opening note, someone said visceral, and absolutely visceral. I'm getting emotional. As I was listening to it, it was just like almost brought tears to my eyes. So that was wonderful. And I've mentioned to several other people here as well that I'm a hunter. And sage grouse is actually something I've been around them, I've seen them, someday maybe. I think it's wonderful what you're doing because there are, I think, hunters in general. I mean, we all gravitate to something. And as a hunter, I mean myself, there's nothing that I don't respect more than those animals. I could get up in the morning and I could listen to them for hours. I took my wife out a couple years ago and she had an elk tag. She never heard elk bugle in the wild, and it just blew her away. And there's just something that brings you closer to God when you're out there. And I think what you're doing is wonderful because it makes people think. It makes people, want to know more. And so whatever you're doing, just keep doing it. I don't have a question. I'm just praising you. So thank you so much.
Well, and that sense of wonder is something I think the art, the music world shares with the science world. When I was out there with Adam, 4 in the morning, freezing cold, I don't know how many hundreds of times he's been out to see dozens of flags, but you can still sense that he has a sense of amazement and wonder at what he's seen. So I do think that appreciation for the world, that connection to the world, is certainly something that science and music and the arts have in common. And that's worth preserving and it's worth protecting.
I want to just share one more thing about forms of inquiry and voices that we need to be hearing. I had the great privilege of reading a manuscript recently by one Darren Perry, who's here today. And I was so struck by this beautiful book and just thinking about knowledge and wisdom traditions that are so strong inside indigenous cultures. They're right here. And it's not, it's just such a beautiful combination of embodied learning, of deep learning, that relates very much to kind of what happens with music. And science is another arm of that. And the more we can broaden our perspective to include all of these lines of inquiry and have all of these voices present, the better we're going to be able to meet the challenges that we face. And so as we're speaking about all of these forms of inquiry and moving just between music and science, I wanted to include that because it's such a richness that's right here.
That's quite a segue. Thank you, Rebecca. You didn't know I was going to ask the next comment. We've been really blessed to be here tonight. And you're going to take a feeling home that you'll never forget. But that's the power of art and poetry and music. It makes us hear and learn from the heart. But that's where real effect takes place. People will always forget facts and figures about history, about climate change. We could have heard a lecture tonight for hours on what we're doing to really harm the environment. People will always forget those things, but they'll never forget how they felt when they hear a story, when they hear a piece like that. It changes people, and that's why the arts is so important. I'm lucky enough to get to teach a class at Utah State, and I teach Indigenous land stewardship and how we can inject Native American value systems into our current system. I'm smart enough to know we're not getting rid of capitalism, but maybe we can do what I call two-eyed seeing from the science perspective and seeing from the Native American perspective who've lived in harmony with nature for thousands of years. There's not enough science in the world that's going to overcome our selfish behaviors. And so that's why events like this are so important. When we assume that scientific knowledge is superior to indigenous wisdom, we make collaboration impossible. And I think that's what it's going to take to save this world going forward. Getting people to the table who have had a voice and lived in the environment for thousands of years. Let's combine the two and come up with just wonderful, wonderful outcomes. But I'm so blessed to be here. Glad I drove down from Logan. Rebecca, thank you for the invitation. And yeah, never forget the feeling you had tonight.
I'm just going to add to Darren's comment in one way. It was 6 years ago that we started the Research Landscape series. This is the first time we've been able to have this type of performance from our King College of the Arts. And I think you can all agree what a powerful experience it's been. And so I want to thank the Fry Street Quartet very much for being willing to bring your work to this type of venue, to share it with all of us today. And so I would ask that all of us give a round of applause for the Fry Street Quartet. That was a first. I will tell you, it's the first standing ovation I've seen at Research Landscapes. And I want to thank each of you for spending a bit of your valuable time with us today. The input we heard from all of you is critical for us to continue to think about how to bring you the very best of Utah State research. And so with that, please take some food on the way out. We also have a survey sitting on your table. If you have an opportunity, there's a pen, and you can give us some very quick feedback that helps us think about our programming for the next event. And with that, thank you again, and travel safe home tonight.
Here's that one. Yeah. Good job. Thanks for being on that for me.